Hey guys, Ponce here, and today I just wanted to talk about the new Nemesis draft mode and how to pick the crappiest team possible for the enemies. Now, this mode's been out for a little while, and I played it for a little bit. It's a relatively simple concept, but I'm still noticing people, a bit confused as to how to give the enemy team really crappy teams. For the most part, people kind of probably realize that you're not supposed to give them damage. The idea is to give them as little damage as possible, but at the same time, you also need to be consistent with your themes. For example, people often give like the all-tank enemy team, but you have to give them the right sorts of tanks, because certain types of tanks end up working well in terms of a general team comp when put together, and they have either good engage or you can actually get damage kind of thing. So there's stuff to consider like that. Or trying to give them an all healer team, but you actually someone on your team gives them damage, and then it ends up being kind of a good team, or they have like a couple healers with a bunch of tanks who can actually deal damage, and that can end up being pretty scary too. Another thing to consider is just basically giving them all crappy laning phase champions. That's another thing to consider. But let's get into actual picks. So when I say you want to give them a consistent theme, with the no damage thing, the tanks you're going to be looking to give people are things like Alistair, Braum, Leona, Rammus, stuff like that. These are all, they're not bad champions per se, but it's really, really difficult for them to get damage, or like significant amounts of it. You can do things like, you can go full AP Alistair and it can sort of do okay damage to like one guy kind of thing. And Braum could, I've seen people do like full AD Braum or Leona, and he had some damage, but it's really not that much. Now, the kinds of champions that, so basically you'd have to do sort of off specs to get them to do okay damage. The champions that are tanky that you probably don't want to be giving people are the ones that I've listed here on the screen. For example, like Amumu, Galio, Sejuani. I'll get to Shyvana in a second here, but for example, Amumu, Galio, Sejuani, those things all do like large amounts of percent damage on there. And same with Zac. Zac deals lots of percent damage when you build him normally. So, that's the kind of thing you want to be avoiding. Scion is another one because, you can build him actually to deal a lot of damage. Most people just build him pure tank. And he can kind of still deal some damage, but Scion, when you build him actually AD, or sort of a fighterish AD thing, is quite scary. Now, Shyvana and Trundle are kind of these weird things that I've seen people try and give the enemy team, and that's a really, really bad idea, considering, we're seeing, in Nemesis draft mode, you see so many tanks. And both these things shred tanks, and they deal damage. So just never give the enemy team Shyvana and Trundle, especially if you're being forced to play a lot of tanks on your end. And then there's sort of these maybe tank categories, depending on what you've already given them. These picks here might not be so good to give them. For example, Shen, Volibear, Singed, Nautilus, Scar, and Nunu. All these things are stuff that can sometimes sort of deal damage. And it's not entirely an off-spec. They're building relatively normally and can scale into some amounts of damage. For example, Shen here doesn't deal the most damage in the world, but it is some, and you can give him a couple damage items and he does okay. Volibear's got percent damage. Singe deals a lot of damage over time, and you can build Leandries on him for percentage damage. Nautilus is a bit of a weird one in the sense, and I included him here because he's got really, really crazy engage, and if your team lacks damage entirely, you can actually build Nautilus with a lot of AP, and he does somewhat respectable damage while remaining tanky. Skarner, similar boat. Good engage kind of thing, and you can deal okay damage if you build like a Trinity Force and stuff like that on him. Nunu actually has scary AP ratios. If you build a lot of AP on Nunu, his snowballs and ults actually deal pretty good damage. So now we've been talking about tanks. The other thing you can go with, the theme you can go with in terms of giving the enemy team, is like pure supports. And not just like the tanky support things, which I've already kind of listed here. See, a lot of the people I listed under tanks to give, notice most of these are, well, 3 of them are supports. Now, aside from the tank supports, you can also give people healer supports. But the thing with the healer supports is this you have to be especially careful with, because healers who are backing stuff up to deal damage are pretty scary. You have to be very, very consistent in what you give the enemy team here, especially. So, for example, Nami and Janna can actually deal some damage, but on their own, they're not really going to do too much. So if you give them no, avenue to deal damage, and they're just kind of healing tanks or supporting tanks, then they're not going to do too much. Same deal with Soraka. Soraka could be really scary if they had something like, a Fed Zac who's built a decent amount of AP or something. Soraka backing that up would be scary, but if they don't have a damage avenue, then Soraka just doesn't do anything. And they'll probably be forced to do something weird like build AD Soraka or something like that. Tark's also a good champion to give the enemy team. The funny thing is you can actually build Tark to deal okay amounts of damage. The guy I duo queue with sometimes, Tsunami, fellow streamer, he actually plays Tark top lane and can actually build him to deal damage, and it's really funny to watch. But most people are not going to be able to do that. Supports you don't want to be giving people under any circumstances, or the supports that actually scale really well with damage. I've listed, there's a lot of them, but I've listed here Sona, Zillion, Karma, Zyra, stuff like that. All these things both have CC and scale well with AP in terms of how much damage they deal. Sona especially, like I played a lot of games where they've given me Sona, and it's not the greatest thing ever early, but once you start getting rolling with the AP, Sona actually does really crazy damage. Those of you guys who watch my stream have probably seen me do it, and don't give the enemy team Sona. You might be tempted to, but just don't. Now, lastly, what I want to get into is these sort of these trap picks that I hear people saying are good things to give the enemy team, but really are not. Typically, they're these sort of things that aren't played too much, or have supposedly a low win ratio, or generally considered bad champions. I'm not here to argue whether or not these are good or bad champions. I'm just here to say that in this mode, especially, these things, Urgot, Elise, Poppy, York, are not good things to give the enemy team. Urgot is, I'll make I'll discuss Urgot a little bit outside of this. Urgot is not actually that bad of a champion. Everyone thinks he's terrible. He's not actually that bad. There are reasons for that. I really don't want to get into that. Maybe I'll make a video about it, sometime in the future. But especially in this mode where everyone has terrible laning phases, and generally speaking, no one has damage. Urgot A has a really good laning phase, B deals damage, and C, he shreds tanks. When you're surrounded by tanks, something that deals damage from range like Urgot that shreds tanks is just going to do very well. Elise is another thing that I would not advise giving away. She's just a very good jungler in terms of her ability to clear stuff. She's a competent jungler, let's put it that way. If you've got a team full of people who just kind of suck at jungling, Elise goes there really easily, and she has percentage damage. Again, percentage damage destroys tanks. And she also got long range CC, stuff like that. Generally speaking, she's got a good kit that deals with stuff in this mode quite well. And she's not something you want to be giving away. The one reason you might consider giving Elise away, let's put her right here as well, is that I don't think a lot of people play Elise, and she has a very weird play style. So it's a risky thing that maybe you could give it to the enemy team and no one knows how to play her, in which case it might be rough on them. But again, she's not a safe pick. She's not something you just want to be giving away freely all the time. Poppy is another one, because Poppy's main problem is the fact that she has basically, well, not the worst, but probably one of the worst laning phases in the entire game. She's like terrible, terrible in lane. But she's sort of this poster child of poor balanced kind of champion, where if she actually gets fed, Poppy is one of the scariest champions in the game, and she just kind of blows up out of nowhere and just starts murdering people when she actually has gold. So when everyone sucks in terms of the laning phase, then champions like Poppy can in theory shine. It's a lot kind of like playing Poppy in ARAM, where you passively get gold and you just have to sit back and play very passively, not die too much, and then Poppy gets scary. So it's similar sort of principle. I wouldn't be giving Poppy away freely. This is a weird one. Now, I would have never thought that people would think York is something to give away, but I've seen it a number of times while playing this mode where people give away York, and I'm going, what? No, don't give away York. Jesus Christ, he's the scariest laning phase in the entire game. If he's up against crappy laners, he will eat them alive, and then he actually does scale somewhat okay. He's not the best scaling champion in the world, but he still deals damage, and he will just murder anything he encounters in lane in this mode, because everyone else sucks at laning, for the most part. Here we're going to get into the part where I'm talking about what I call picks you might want to give, but they're not exactly the safest picks. It's stuff like Evelynn, Shaco, and Elise that have very weird play styles that not a lot of people play, and if you're not sort of specialized in playing this champion or very little experience with it, odds are the person is going to suck quite a bit. Now, again, all these things can do well, which is why I'm saying it's risky, so you might not want to always give it away, but yeah, there's a good chance no one on the enemy team like will either have very little experience with it or have never played any of these things before. So it's something to consider at the very least, if you've run out of picks for whatever reason. Now, at the end here, I'm going to briefly talk about bans just a little bit, but it's brief because, frankly, I don't really care about bans in this mode. Well, I don't really care about bans in normal rank games either, but that's another story. The philosophy I've gone with is I've just banned stuff that I don't want to play. It's a very selfish way of thinking about it, but generally speaking, there's going to be enough crappy champions to go around that I don't worry about bans, in that sense. The other thing is I tend to ban trap picks that my teammates might want to pick, because everyone gets to go through and pick a champion for the enemy team, right? I can tell my team, don't give them this, but you'd be surprised how many times I say, don't give them this, guys, don't give them this, and then they'll go, okay, and then someone, for example, let's use Zach as an example. I said, guys, don't give them Zach. They have an all tank team. This is an actual example, by the way. They have an all-tank team with no damage. They have a lot of long-range engage, so they can all-in us a lot because they already have, Nautilus and, stuff like that. Don't give them Zac because he can actually deal % shred damage, and he's really disruptive. We've got a lot of long-range engage. Don't give it to them. And, lo and behold, our fourth pick gives them Zac. And Zac basically holds the enemy team together because, just how the picks ended up working. So I tend to use my bans for trap picks that people think are good things to give the enemy team, but really aren't. For example, like Urgot, Elise, Poppy, York, Zac as well. I probably should have included down here, but he's under the maybe tank category. Oh no, he's under the tanks don't give category. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Nemesis draft. Hopefully you guys have found this somewhat informative. Like I said, I'm not saying I'm the greatest Nemesis draft player ever, but these are my thoughts, and I think they're, my ideas on this are relatively coherent. Maybe not. I've been drinking, but yeah, I'll see you guys around.